In the spring of 1772, beneath an ordinary farmhouse in backcountry, Virginia authorities uncovered dozens of children who had vanished over nearly 20 years. Chained, starving, and trained to call their captor mother, the woman responsible lived openly among her neighbors. She attended church, she donated to charity, and no one suspected a thing. This is the story of how evil learned to dress itself as kindness. Ashford Hollow was the kind of place where secrets weren't supposed to survive. Fewer than 60 families lived there, scattered across rolling fields and thin forest lines. People knew one another's births, illnesses, and deaths. Outsiders stood out. Silence stood out even more. And yet, for almost 2 decades, something unspeakable existed right in the center of it all. At the edge of the settlement stood the Halloway farm. From the road, it looked harmless. A white clapboard house, a narrow front porch, a red barn leaning slightly with age. Travelers passed it without slowing. Neighbors passed it without fear. No one could see what lay beneath it. The woman who ran the household was Mistress Eleanor Halloway. She arrived in Ashford Hollow in 1754, newly married to Silas Halloway, a quiet man with inherited land and old tobacco money. Eleanor was young then, 23, soft-spoken, always neatly dressed. She rarely raised her voice and never argued in public. People trusted her almost immediately. Eleanor had a gift for explanation. She spoke often of children in need, orphans, the forgotten, little souls abandoned by disease, war, or poverty. She told neighbors that distant relatives from Pennsylvania and the Carolinas sent these children to her temporarily, just until proper homes could be arranged. In the 18th century, death was common. Orphans were everywhere. No one questioned her story. From time to time, townspeople saw children on the Halloway property. A small face behind a wagon rail. Thin figures crossing the yard at dusk. They never waved, never spoke. Eleanor said they were shy, traumatized, learning to trust again. That explanation was enough. The general store ledgers show Eleanor purchased large quantities of food every 2 weeks. Flour, cornmeal, salt pork, molasses, enough to feed a large household. She also bought medicine, fever powders, salves, laudanum. When asked, she smiled and said, "Children are always sick when they come to me." What no one asked was why those children never attended church, never attended school, never played in town. At night, lantern light glowed beneath the Halloway house long after others slept. Silas claimed he was improving the cellar, reinforcing foundations, expanding storage. He paid laborers in cash and dismissed them before dawn. Each man worked only one section. None ever saw the whole. By 1772, whispers began to circulate. Farm animals refused to graze near the house. Dogs whined and pulled against their leashes. At night, some neighbors claimed they heard sounds drifting across the fields. Not laughter, crying. Most dismissed it as wind moving through old beams. Then came the storm. In February, a trader named Jonah Price sought shelter from sudden snow. Eleanor welcomed him in. She served cornbread and salt pork. Conversation was polite but strained. That night, lying near the hearth, Price heard it. Muffled sobbing, weak voices, coming from beneath the floor. At breakfast, Silas blamed settling earth. Eleanor blamed the cold. Price left unsettled, but alive. 3 weeks later, a young girl traveling west vanished near Ashford Hollow. And on March 28th, a local hunter heard screaming beneath the Halloway house, screaming that lasted nearly an hour. When the sheriff finally rode out to investigate, he expected gossip. What he found beneath that house would haunt him for the rest of his life. And this was only the beginning. By the time Sheriff Caleb Ward reached the Halloway farm, the sun was already sinking. March 28, 1772. The air carried that uneasy stillness that comes before nightfall. Birds quiet, wind low, everything listening. Ward wasn't alone. 2 deputies followed, along with Reverend Miles and a handful of townsmen who insisted on coming. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt the same thing. Something was wrong with that house. Mistress Eleanor Halloway greeted them at the door. She did not look frightened. She did not look angry. She looked prepared. "Gentlemen," she said softly, hands folded at her waist. "What brings you here so late?" The sheriff explained the reports, the screams, the missing girl, the rumors that refused to die. Eleanor listened patiently, nodding at all the right moments. "You are welcome to search," she said. "I have nothing to hide." That sentence would echo in Ward's mind for the rest of his life. They searched the house first. Upstairs bedrooms were neat. Too neat. No toys, no spare clothing, no signs of children living above ground. The kitchen smelled faintly of herbs and lye soap. Everything scrubbed clean. Silas Halloway stood silently near the hearth, eyes lowered. When asked about the cellar, Eleanor hesitated, just long enough to be noticed. "It is unfinished," she said. "Damp, dangerous," Sheriff Ward insisted. Silas fetched the lantern. The cellar door was hidden beneath a braided rug near the back wall. When lifted, a rush of cold air spilled upward, carrying a smell that made several men step back instinctively. Rot, waste, and something far worse. The stairs creaked as they descended. The cellar was larger than expected. The walls were reinforced with fresh timber. Too fresh, too deliberate. The floor was packed earth, except in places where boards had been laid, forming narrow walkways. Then the lantern light shifted, and the men froze. Iron rings were set into the walls. Chains hung loose, and some did not. A sound rose from the darkness. Not screaming, whispering, thin voices, weak voices. Children. They found them in compartments carved into the earth beneath the house. Crude cells, sealed with boards and weighted stones. When the first panel was pulled free, a child collapsed forward, too weak to stand. Skin stretched tight over bone. Eyes clouded with hunger and fear. Mouth opening, closing. No sound coming out. Another compartment. Another child. Then another. Some were chained. Some were bound with rope. All were filthy. All were alive. Barely. One deputy vomited. Reverend Miles fell to his knees and began praying aloud, voice shaking. Sheriff Ward stood in silence, lantern trembling in his hand. "How many?" he whispered. They stopped counting after 20. Above them, Eleanor screamed. Not in fear, in rage. She fought like an animal when they dragged her down the cellar steps. Her calm was gone. Her voice shrill. Her eyes wild. "They were mine," she shouted. "God gave them to me." Silas said nothing. When the chains were removed, some children recoiled, crying harder. Others clung to the men in uniforms, terrified of being left behind. One boy, no more than 10, stared at Eleanor as she was bound. "She said we were sinners," he whispered. "She said pain made us clean." By dawn, word had spread through Ashford Hollow. The house that never needed locks had been hiding a prison. And as the children were carried into the light, the townspeople realized the truth too late. This horror had not been hidden in the wilderness. It had lived next door. And the question no one wanted to ask yet was this: how long had Eleanor Halloway been doing this? And how many children had never been found? Eleanor Halloway did not plead. As she sat in the Ashford Hollow jailhouse, wrists bound, dress torn, she stared calmly at the far wall as if this moment had always been inevitable. Sheriff Caleb Ward expected tears, begging, rage. He got none of it. "She believes she's done nothing wrong," the sheriff muttered to the jailer, and that frightened him more than screaming ever could. Over the next 2 days, survivors were questioned. Most of the children struggled to speak. Their words came slowly, like language itself had been beaten out of them. Some had been held for months, others, years. One girl, Hannah, remembered arriving at the farm when she was 5. She was nearly 13 now. "She said she was saving us," Hannah whispered. "She said the world was rotten." The pattern began to emerge. Eleanor didn't steal children from Ashford Hollow. She targeted the invisible ones. Runaways, orphans, children sent ahead by families migrating west. Those who wouldn't be missed right away. She met them on roads, at trading posts, outside churches. She spoke gently, offered food, promised shelter. Then she took them home. Sheriff Ward sent riders to nearby counties, tracing Eleanor's movements backward through the years. What they uncovered chilled everyone involved. Before marrying Silas, Eleanor had lived in Fredericksburg, then Annapolis, then briefly near Williamsburg. In each place, children had disappeared. Not enough to raise alarms, just enough to leave questions. Her maiden name had been Eleanor Pike. The record showed her parents died during a fever outbreak when she was 12. She was taken in by a religious household known for strict discipline. Very strict. Neighbors from that time described beatings for the good of the soul, locked rooms, food withheld as punishment, prayer enforced through pain. By 16, Eleanor had learned a lesson she never forgot. Suffering could be justified. When asked why she did it, Eleanor finally spoke. "You don't understand," she said calmly. "They came to me broken." She claimed the children were unclean, that hunger purified them, that isolation stripped away sin. They needed correction, she said. Someone had to do it. The sheriff asked about the chains. "Restraint," she replied, "like reins on a horse." Silas Halloway was questioned next. He broke within minutes. He claimed he never went below the house, that Eleanor handled everything, that he believed the cellar was for storage. But the carpentry told a different story. The reinforced beams, the hidden compartments, the divided labor. Someone had planned that cellar carefully. When confronted, Silas wept. "I was afraid of her," he admitted. "She changed after the first child." That was the moment Ward realized the truth. There had been a first. Someone Eleanor tested her beliefs on. Someone who didn't survive. Records from 1755 revealed a missing boy, Thomas Reed, age 7. Last seen near the Halloway property shortly after Eleanor arrived. No body was ever found. The cellar floor was dug up. Beneath the packed earth, they uncovered small bones. Not all could be identified. Some had been there for years. As the scale of the crimes became clear, Ashford Hollow fell silent. Doors closed early. Candles burned late. Parents held their children closer. This wasn't just a crime. It was a reckoning. Because Eleanor Halloway had not been hiding in the shadows. She had been trusted. And now the town had to face an unbearable question. How many times had they smiled at her, while children suffered beneath her feet? By early April of 1772, Ashford Hollow no longer felt like a town. It felt like a wound. Word of what was found beneath the Halloway house spread faster than any rider could control. By the time Eleanor was transferred to the county jail, people had begun arriving from neighboring settlements just to stare at the place where it happened. Some spat on the ground. Some crossed themselves. Some simply stood in silence. The children were moved to the church hall. Straw pallets lined the floor. Volunteers took turns sitting with them through the night, afraid to leave them alone with the dark. Many woke screaming. When Eleanor was brought before the magistrate, the room overflowed. Men packed shoulder to shoulder. Women stood along the walls. No one spoke when she entered. She walked calmly, head high, eyes clear. She looked unashamed. The charges were read aloud. Unlawful confinement, cruel punishment, conspiracy to commit harm, suspicion of murder. Each charge landed like a hammer. When asked to respond, Eleanor spoke evenly. "I acted as I believed God required." A murmur rippled through the room. The magistrate ordered silence. Witnesses followed. Sheriff Ward described the cellar, the chains, the children pulled from the earth. His voice broke only once. Then the children themselves were brought in. Not all of them. Only those strong enough to stand. One by one, they spoke. Some could barely lift their heads. Others stared at the floor as if expecting punishment. They described hunger so constant, it felt normal. Darkness so long they forgot the sun. Rules enforced with beatings. She said pain was love, one boy whispered. The courtroom wept. Eleanor did not. When Hannah was asked to identify her captor, she hesitated. Then she looked directly at Eleanor. "That's her," she said softly. "She said she owned us." For the first time, Eleanor's expression changed. Not remorse, irritation. Silas was brought in next. He tried to shift blame, claimed ignorance, claimed fear. The magistrate listened patiently, then asked a single question. "Who built the cages?" Silas said nothing. That silence condemned him. Outside the courthouse, anger grew. People demanded execution. Some demanded public hanging. Others whispered darker ideas. The magistrate ordered extra guards. Justice in the 18th century moved slowly, but mobs did not. That night, someone tried to set fire to the jail. The flames were put out quickly, but the message was clear. Eleanor smiled when she heard. "She belongs to us," she said from her cell. "You can't hide her." The court reconvened 2 days later. Evidence piled high. Testimony stacked deep. The verdict was inevitable. Guilty. On all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for the following week. Yet as the courtroom emptied, Sheriff Ward felt no relief. Too many bones had been found. Too many years unaccounted for. This story was bigger than Ashford Hollow, and Eleanor knew it. As Ward turned to leave, Eleanor called out to him. "You think this ends me?" she asked quietly. He did not answer. She smiled anyway, because in her mind, the damage was already done. The sentence was delivered on April 14, 1772. No bells rang. No prayers were offered aloud. The magistrate spoke plainly, his voice echoing through the packed chamber. Eleanor Halloway was to be taken from the county jail and publicly executed for crimes so grievous they defied both law and Christian mercy. Silas Halloway, found complicit through construction and concealment, was sentenced to lifelong hard labor. His land and property were seized. The house was ordered destroyed. When Eleanor heard her fate, she nodded once. No tears, no protest, only disappointment. She never understood, she said quietly. They were mine. Those words spread faster than the verdict itself. On the morning of the execution, the road outside Ashford Hollow filled before dawn. Families came from miles away. Some brought children, believing they should see what justice looked like. Sheriff Ward hated that idea. Eleanor was brought out just after sunrise. She walked steadily, her back straight, her face calm. Not once did she look at the crowd. Not once did she ask forgiveness. As the noose was placed, the minister offered her final words. She declined. The lever was pulled, and just like that, it was over, or so everyone hoped. The children were sent to neighboring towns, placed with families willing to take them in. Some adapted. Some never slept through a full night again. A few refused to enter cellars. Others panicked when doors closed. Hannah left Ashford Hollow before summer. Silas was last seen months later, thinner and silent, working fields he no longer owned. He died unnamed, unmarked. The Halloway house was torn down plank by plank. Yet when workers reached the cellar, they stopped. More bones were found. Too many. No one could say how many children passed through that house, or how many never left. By autumn, Ashford Hollow changed. People spoke less, trusted less. They locked doors that had never needed locks before. Years later, travelers passing through asked why the land where the Halloway house once stood remained empty. No crops, no buildings, just grass. The locals gave the same answer every time. Some places shouldn't be built on again. Because evil, they learned too late, does not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it knocks politely. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it calls itself mercy. And sometimes it lives right beneath your feet.